Aren't we being treated to a glut of excellence on the show today? The guests just keep getting better and better and better. Honestly, it's amazing sitting in the studio when you've got such brilliant contributors. That's all about to change because we're now joined by Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan. Hiya, Kev.
Yeah, your guest list just fell off a cliff.
Yeah, that's it. I'm done for now. But there's nothing I like more than just sitting down with you and having a good old rant about everything. We've got to start off talking about what's going on in Epping Forest. It's a screaming mess. People are upset. They have every right to be. But you kind of think, protest as much as you like, they ain't listening in Number 10. They ain't listening in the Cabinet Office. They're not having Cobra meetings saying, we've hit 11th hour and then some. We've really got to pull our fingers out and do something about this. So where do we go from here?
I mean, yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, as we discussed earlier in the week, I was covering this story on Monday because there'd been demonstrations from angry local people all weekend in Epping. Not that you'd know from the television news channels or the newspapers or anything. Last night, it got really bad. We were reporting on it live, watching stones and bricks being hurled at the police, people leaping over police vans, ripping off windshield, really getting nasty, running battles. Nothing. This morning you read Sky News's written report said, disturbances unfolded outside what is believed to be a hotel that accommodates that's believed to accommodate asylum seekers. It's not believed to accommodate asylum seekers. It's full of asylum seekers. This is a pretty little town to the north of London, Epping, by Epping Forest, and they've got a little hotel in the middle of it called the Bell Hotel, which is now home to more than 100 asylum seekers, mostly young men of sexually active age. And guess what? One of them, who arrived here on the 29th of June, within 8 days was in Colchester Magistrates Court, accused of allegedly attacking 3 local women, sexually assaulting them in just 2 days. Now, he denies those charges, but you can understand why the local community is upset. But of course, this is all the politicians on social media, disgraceful scenes from the far right and so on and so forth. Yes, some far-right thugs definitely went there looking for trouble. I'll tell you who else went there looking for trouble. Antifa, far-left thugs, who extraordinarily, before last night's proper demonstration, protest by parents, mothers, fathers, grandchildren, worried about safety for women, worried about safety for their kids on the streets. These Antifa people turn up at the station. The police escorted them into the middle of the riot, right outside the hotel. A little bit of a recipe for trouble, don't you think? And they've got their standard issue pathetic placards going, well, refugees, stop the far right, and all this, stop hate and all this. These people, just as much as, admittedly there are right-wing thugs who go looking for trouble, these are left-wing thugs looking for trouble, escorted lovingly by the police into the middle of the disturbances. Bit of a recipe for disaster, that.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's funny, when it's other protests, I remember when there's been pro-Palestine marches and people who are sort of more pro-Israel have been told, don't go near there, you're not allowed near them, it's just going to stir up even more discontent if the two sides face off. We even had that time when you had the sort of BLM riots and the far right, and it's like, well, they've got to be kept completely separate. Then all of a sudden, it's like, oh no, you lefties with the, like you said, standard issue Socialist Workers' Party placards, come on in. Why don't you make it even worse? Poke the bear in the zoo, why don't you? It just beggars belief. But I don't know where we go from here.
You've got to ask yourself whose side of the police on. I've seen these pro-Palestine marches. I'll tell you whose side the police are on, the pro-Palestine marches. It's as simple as that. Whose side were they on last night? Looks to me like Antifa. Looks like the left-wing yobs were being protected or sanctioned by the police. The police have got to start being a little more impartial in the way they cover these disturbances. And by the way, what we've seen in Epping over the last few days, stand by for it to happen all over the country.
I was going to ask you about this, because this is where sometimes, I don't know if you ever get this, Kev, but sometimes I go to bed and I think, Have I said something, a word too far today? Am I going to be accused of stoking up tensions because I want to talk about these issues? I think it is desperately important that we talk about these issues for the safety and security of girls, the integrity of our communities. And yet you kind of think, you know, what if someone comes and points a finger at us right now and goes, oh, there you go. All the other media decided not to maximise on talking about what's going on in Epping Forest so as to sort of do their part in making sure there aren't copycat protests around the country. And here we are. We have the audacity to dare talk about it, so we're just as bad. Do you ever get that concern that they're going to come after us for talking about this stuff?
Well, yeah, I do, in this increasingly sinister country that we live. Well, I read the Guardian report on last night's disturbances. In about the 48th paragraph, it finally mentioned that a local asylum seeker had been charged with sexual assault. It finally mentioned. Apart from that, you'd have thought it was just far-right thugs that, you know, putting a pin in a map saying, where should we go and have a riot tonight? Oh, I know, let's try Epping. As if there was no reason for it at all, except they were far-right rioters. That's the only thing they said. When did journalists, so many journalists, decide that they had the right to morally decide what news is? News is news. You have to report it if you're going to be a proper journalist. What these journalists are doing is filling in with the establishment, fitting in with the great and the good, and trying to keep the reality of what is happening all over the country a secret. And that what is happening all over the country, you see in the Sun newspaper today, is that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of asylum seeker young men are being charged with more and more crimes and more sex crimes. You can try and keep a lid on that if you want, but it won't last long. This is a powder keg that is going to erupt.
And also, why should they keep a lid on it when girls are being attacked by men from other countries? I think we have every right to know about it and protest against it. Talking about journalistic values, the BBC are going to roll out anti-Semitism awareness training after a string of scandals. I don't know if you saw the leak from some sort of email and some presentation I think Deborah Turnus, the head of news, did towards staff following that Hamas documentary.
We broke the story. We broke the story.
Saying there's a difference between Hamas militia and Hamas ministers. I mean, now they're going to roll out anti-Semitism training. What's that going to say?
She is the chief executive of news, the head of news, the head of all the journalists in the state broadcaster, and she doesn't know how Gaza is governed and doesn't realise that there is no difference between, say, a Hamas government minister and some Hamas yob walking the streets with a machine gun. She doesn't know that there is no difference, that they are all prescribed. She thought that the Hamas members of the government of Gaza were somehow legal and not proscribed. That is just shocking. The head of news at the BBC, and she's just had a pay rise. Guess how much too? £431,000 a year. It's just breathtaking. She's an ignoramus. She doesn't know how Gaza is governed. No wonder the BBC gets in all this trouble about its coverage of that region, because it doesn't understand it. Unbelievable. As for the anti-Semitism courses, I mean, in some ways, I got to say, well, thank God. It looks like someone at the BBC might have finally, the penny may have finally dropped, that just maybe the BBC has a tiny bit of an anti-Semitism problem. So in some ways, I suppose I applaud the fact they're going to offer anti-Semitism classes or courses to the staff. But you have to then step back and think, my God, they have to give anti-Semitism courses at the BBC, the state broadcaster that we pay for, the BBC that's supposed to be impartial. What the hell has gone wrong there? I suggest it might be the head of news.
Well, I'll tell you what, talking about anti-Semitism, don't you worry about that. Diane Abbott's at a loose end, haven't been suspended from the Labour Party. She can go and explain to the BBC that anti-Semitism isn't necessarily racism because Jews aren't necessarily black.
Exactly right. Well, in that letter to the Observer that got her in trouble, it was now about a couple of years ago, I think. That's when she sort of got suspended from the Labour Party before. She eventually offered a grudging apology and was sort of welcomed back in. Well, she's now been suspended again because she's doubled down on the letter and said she had no regrets. And what that letter essentially says is racism towards Jewish people isn't nearly as bad as racism towards people of colour, black people. She starts talking about, Jews were never made to ride at the back of the bus in the south of America. Jews were never segregated, etc., etc. You might also say that perhaps you want to take on board that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. I think they have suffered from prejudice as much as any other people have suffered from prejudice, arguably worse. So Diane Abbott is wrong there. And of course, she won't care she's been kicked out of the Labour Party because she's going to join Hezbollah, isn't she? She's going to join Jeremy Corbyn's new party, is her old boyfriend, where they can be anti-Semitic and shout and scream about awful Jews as much as they like, while making the very important caveat, it's not Jews that we don't like. We reserve the right to object to Israel. No, Jeremy, no, Diane, it's Jews you don't like. We've got your number. Thank you.
Talking about having the number, I bet it's going to be such a loss to the Labour Treasury that Diane Abbott and her famous abacus aren't going to be helping Rachel Reeves do her sums to save the economy. Kevin, always great having you on the show. Of course, watch Kev tonight. Use your slot for the political asylum. You don't want to miss it.